Good morning. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. I'm Barry Bryson, and we're continuing our study of the Gospel of Matthew. And we're at Caiaphas's house tonight. Today, Jesus has been led immediately by the mob that came to arrest him, taken to the house of the high priest Caiaphas. Caiaphas has been installed by the Roman governor that preceded Pontius Pilate. And Pontius Pilate and Caiaphas were bitter enemies with each other. In fact, there was a pending court case being adjudicated through the Roman court system in which Caiaphas, as high priest and representative of the Jewish religion, which is a legal religion in Rome, and has rights and protections of the law granted by the Senate, suing Pilate for violating those. That will play out, and Pilate will lose that law battle, that legal battle, and Pilate, according to the historians that we have, will be forced to commit suicide because of the scandal of it. None of that has happened yet. Caiaphas, though, his father-in-law Annas should probably be high priest, but he's been installed as high priest by the Roman governor, and Jesus is taken to his house. It would have been a large house for Jerusalem. Maybe not large to us, but large for the time. Most people lived in square one-room homes, 18 by 18, 24 by 24, with a little courtyard in front and using the roof as basically a second room. But his house would probably have been U-shaped, with a large courtyard, and the middle of the U would have been a gathering space for meals and for business and entertaining, and that's where we find Jesus today. So let's read our passage. Those who had seized Jesus led him away to Caiaphas the high priest, where the scribes and the elders were gathered together. Not all of them, by the way, some of them. Peter also followed him at a distance as far as the courtyard of the high priest, and entered in and sat down with the officers to see the outcome. Now, the chief priests and the whole council kept trying to obtain false testimony against Jesus in order that they might put him to death. And they did not find it, even though many false witnesses came forward. But later on, 2 came forward, and you have to have 2 witnesses which agree to convict someone. And they said, "This man stated, 'I am able to destroy the temple of God and rebuild it in 3 days.'" The high priest stood up and said to him, "Do you make no answer? What is it these men are testifying against you?" But Jesus kept silent. And the high priest said to him, "I adjure you by the living God that you tell us whether you are the Christ, the Son of God." That's an interesting way of phrasing that. Jesus said to him, "You have said it. Nevertheless, I tell you, hereafter you shall see, the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven." That's a quote from Daniel chapter 7, verse 13. Then the high priest tore his robe, saying, "He has blasphemed. What further need do we have of witnesses? Behold, you have now heard the blasphemy. What do you think?" And they answered and said, "He is deserving of death." Then they spat in his face and beat him with their fists, and others slapped him, saying, "Prophesy to us, you Christ. Who is the one who hit you?" There's a lot here. False witnesses were supposed to be put to death. Deuteronomy chapter 19, verses 16 through 21. But they keep going through them, trying to find 2 that will agree, and seem to not care so long as they can find 2 that will agree. Why do they even have to do this? Why not just make him a victim of mob violence? Well, for 2 reasons. One reason is it mattered to Rome. And we can talk a little bit about good government now, because a few decades later than this, the Apostle Paul will find himself the victim of mob violence at the temple. And Claudius Lysias, the commanding officer at the fortress there, the fortress of Antonia next to the temple, sees it happening. And he brings Roman troops to save one Jew from a mob of other Jews, because that was his job. And this is Passover time. There's heightened security and heightened sensitivity to unrest. And so they can't just go kill somebody and not pay for it. They need to get the Romans to execute him. And also because they need to discredit Jesus among the people publicly, which they're going to have opportunity to do. And so they convened this kangaroo court. There's no way, even in a home as large as his, that the entire council of the Sanhedrin could have gathered together. Besides, it was illegal for them to gather together as the Sanhedrin, as a legal body, unless they did so at the meeting room provided for them and on the temple grounds. I mean, that's just good government between Rome and the Jews. So this is not legal. So I think when he says the whole council, I think he means the whole council there, that the people who were there doing this were unanimous in their collusion to this terrible crime that's about to take place. It's interesting that Caiaphas understands that the Messiah will be the Son of God, because that's how he describes it. I also think it's interesting that Jesus is very careful not to use God's name. That would have been blasphemy in Second Temple Judaism. He says the right hand of power, not the right hand of God, when he quotes Daniel 7 and shows that discretion. But it's when he does that the high priest tears his robes in a public act of mourning, and says he's blasphemed because he did not deny that he was the Christ, the Son of the living God. And then we have them slapping him, saying, prophesy to us, who hit you? And there is, throughout Matthew's gospel, very clear description of the humiliation that Jesus was subjected to. This is personal. This is not just injustice. This is personal. This is angry. This is the kind of thing that they did to Emmett Till. I mean, it wasn't enough to kill him. They had to take out their anger on him and humiliate him. And that's what they do to Jesus. And to me, maybe the best description in literature of something akin to this is the metaphorical description of it in Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe, when Aslan yields himself to humiliation and death. Which, of course, Aslan is the Christ figure in that book. Matthew needs us to know that it wasn't just an act of injustice or martyrdom. There was a great deal of humiliation that was just meted out to Jesus because there was so much hate from human beings that he was dying for, that just felt it needed to express itself against him and to cause him pain. We'll finish up chapter 26 next time. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word.